Ukrainian forces make steady advances as Russian defenses collapse. War in Ukraine explained. Let's start today's report by analyzing the most recent data regarding the body line. It is important to remember some specifics about Bombit's location. You may recall that Park Med was a major focus in the early days of the conflict between Russia and Ukraine. Bakhmut is important for two armies for several reasons. It is a major highway extending to Kyiv, Ukraine's capital. Protecting Bakhmut is, therefore, vital for Ukraine. Despite its setbacks after a prolonged battle, the Ukrainian army is closer to liberating Bakhmut than ever. Let's now examine the situation along the northern front. Local sources claim that the Ukrainian army has fully consolidated its control of the positions they have taken in the area. Based on the current situation, the Ukrainian troops' next objective is to enter Bergyevka or Yani. Many experts consider the Ukrainian army's counter-offensive strategy to be smart. This tactic involves easing attacks behind the front line before launching the main attack. These attacks have been a great success for the Ukrainian artillery. The Russian army stationed in Bakhmut depends on strategic positions like the Emulation Depot or Feral Depot. The limited mobility of Russian troops in the direction of Uhet and Bergyevka is also noteworthy. The territorial advantage that Ukrainian troops have gained in the area restricts Russian soldiers' ability to leave their positions or retreat. Artillery fire from Ukraine can be a threat to them. The Ukrainian army's defense line, which was constructed during the siege of a month, is the main advantage that Russian troops have. Paramount, closer than ever before to being captured by the Ukrainian army, is changing this situation. We can see the Ukrainian army is close to victory in Klitschia. The blue areas are the liberated areas as part of the ongoing offensive. The distance between the liberated red and green areas is just 684 meters. The distance between the armies is now measured in meters. Lukashenko saw a great opportunity after a short civil war in Russia. The Russian Civil War only lasted one day, but its effects were profound. Russian soldiers and Prigozhin troops engaged in violent clashes on the streets of Moscow. The civil war ended abruptly when Belarusian President Lukashenko appeared unexpectedly on the scene. This raised questions regarding the discussions behind closed doors at the Kremlin. Belarusians were concerned by the Russian army's severe losses in Ukraine and its intention to use Belarus as a launching pad. Lukashenko's bold maneuvers have also heightened concerns. Putin, who Lukashenko may have angered for allowing thousands of Russian rebels into Belarus and closing the border to them simultaneously, maintains silence. He insists only separatists would be punished. The West was forced to act decisively, with the Polish army closing the borders between Kaliningrad and Belarus. They also deployed tens of thousands of soldiers along the border. This has caused divisions within the Belarusian population and army, especially among the Belarusian soldiers who are fighting against the Russians of the Ukrainian army and the anti-war rebel groups in Belarus. These groups are acting against both Putin's and Lukashenko's policies, undermining and raising concerns about Putin's intentions. Lukashenko acted against Russia because of the growing concern among his people over the war. This could have triggered a rebellion. Belarus's decision to close its borders with Russia was an important move that escalated tensions during the ongoing war. Alexander Lukashenko, who declared himself the president of Belarus, held a meeting to discuss current security issues and measures to protect the state border. As a result of border provocations and the infiltration of saboteurs by border saboteurs, temporary border controls were implemented along the Russian border. Belarus has implemented temporary border checks with the Russian Federation at all major entry points. These actions are related to implementing and ratifying the Visa Reciprocity Agreement between Russia and Belarus. The border is currently controlled in 6 directions, limiting entry into Belarus. Representatives from the State Border Committee said border control was temporary. However, they were unable to provide an end date. The border control measures will continue to be in place until further notice. Checkpoints and border control measures have been implemented, resulting in reports of long queues at the M1 route. The Russians implemented strict procedures, with all vehicles being unloaded and everyone's documents recorded. The recent events and the Russian-Ukrainian conflict have taken their toll on the Belarusian government and the people. The opposition and Belarusian soldiers fighting for Ukraine are at the edge of a major uprising. Lukashenko, Putin, and the Belarusian dissidents did not expect the Belarusian army to train the Belarusian population and dissidents, or for many Belarusians to fight against the Russians. Since the start of the conflict, it has been well known that the Belarusians have fought alongside the Ukrainians against Lukashenko and Putin. The Belarusian army receiving training from Poland's army is a sign that the situation in the country has reached a crisis level. Lukashenko has confirmed several developments that suggest the Belarusians can remove both Putin and Lukashenko. This dire situation could force Lukashenko to maintain power, to distance himself from Putin. We will examine the Belarusian uprising and their training with Polish soldiers in detail. The Belarusian army has begun military training in Poland to prepare for scenarios that could be critical, such as the removal from power of Lukashenko and Putin's involvement with the Ukraine conflict. Belarusian dissidents are trained in Poland to use weapons and guerrilla tactics to overthrow Lukashenko. Lukashenko's opponents are in trouble. They were expelled from Belarus and now receive combat training to prepare for the regime's overthrow. Belarusians are receiving more and more military training. These Belarusians have reportedly acquired combat skills and experience, including in drones, kamikazes, raids, surveillance, and observation. Bipol is a Polish-backed private military company that provides this training to counter any possible threat from Putin, who Lukashenko Belarusian opposition militants may support. Even their families are unaware of their alleged involvement in guerrilla warfare. Lukashenko's move during the Russian Civil War caught Putin by surprise. Lukashenko mediated, and the Wagner forces' coup attempt was defeated within 200 kilometers of Moscow on Saturday night. In this conflict, the Kremlin forces and Wagner were the major winners. According to the Kremlin, the central character in this conflict was Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko. He emerged as a major character because of his long-standing relationship with Prigozhin. Lukashenko offered to negotiate peace, as he had known Prigozhin for at least 20 years. Lukashenko's strategic skills were on display as Prigozhin advanced toward Moscow. Belarus was relatively calm during this time, and the Belarusian government readily accepted the presence of Russian insurgent forces. Lukashenko, however, had never aligned himself with Putin's opponents. Belarus and Russia were both backed by one country that was strongly against the invasion. Poland's strategic position, supported by the United States, made it a perfect supporter of Ukraine. Poland was thrust into the forefront of the Second Cold War. It is now a major NATO member, an important contributor to the common defense, and a close ally of the United States. Poland has been siding with Ukraine in the war against Russia since the beginning. Germany has taken over the role of temporary headquarters in coordinating military aid to Ukraine. Poland is a major hub for the transport of military equipment to Ukraine. It has also been actively expanding its 300,000-strong army. Over 1,500 powerful tanks have been purchased by the country, and Patriot missile systems are installed in M1 Abrams tanks along Poland's border with Russia and Belarus. What will happen next? What has been the impact of the collapse of Russian defenses on the dynamics of war in Ukraine? Nobody knows, because you can expect anything from both sides during the war. So stay with us as we regularly bring you authentic news from the battleground.